welcome to the ProLife Team podcast. I'm here with Allison, and we're going to talk about branding. Brand names that are good, brand names that might need some help and love and care, and sort of talk about the story of how you can get to a brand that you're going to enjoy down the road. So, Allison, I am glad to have you here. Thank you for joining me. Would you introduce yourself as if you were talking to a group of executive directors?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Allison Guzman. I have been in the pregnancy center world and in the pro-life movement for about 9 years. I spent about 7 years running pregnancy centers. And then I've spent some time doing marketing for pregnancy centers.
Awesome. And doing that marketing work and with your experience, which brands have you come across that you think were good, and maybe we can talk about which ones maybe not or aren't so good. But tell me your thoughts about brands and names of pregnancy clinics. What comes to mind when we bring up that topic?
Yeah, of course. So there's a lot more to marketing and branding than just the name, obviously. So it's not necessarily that the name is always going to fail you if you have this name, or it's going to be great if you have this other name. But I definitely, along the way, have learned some pretty useful tips. I think I'm going to preface this with saying that the only truly evidence-based thing I can say, as far as research has shown, is life shouldn't be in the name. Um, Other than that, a lot of this is opinion and observation and just years of experience. So I do want to kind of make that clear. I'm not necessarily backing this with tons of research other than that one point. but
Yeah.
but there's definitely preferences, I think. To me, the biggest thing is professionalism. So a lot of pregnancy centers, tons of them, have names like Hope something or something Grace, and those names sound really nice. And I think a lot of times they appeal to their donor base, but they don't sound professional. And not every pregnancy center has a medical model, but especially one that has a medical model, you you want to sound like a medical clinic. If you're going to be a medical clinic, make your name reflect that.
That's really good. Yeah, and going back to life, so there's a clinic in La Habra. It's called La Habra Life Centers of Orange
Mhm.
County, and I was speaking to Meki, their director, and this is probably like 10 or so years ago. And I essentially had told her that we need to change the name because the word life is like a roadblock or a marketing landmine where it's going to
Mhm.
drive the abortion minded to think, oh, that's probably pro-life, and I'm going to go try again on Google. And then one of my colleagues challenged me on that, and essentially he was pushing the idea of maybe instead of asking them to change the name, maybe we should reframe the name. So we ended up trying to reframe it. I'm not sure if it was the best decision, but what we ended up doing was we used the phrase, we essentially made their slogan larger than the logo and made the slogan say, "It's your life, it's your choice. You have time, be informed." And with that, it's your life. We're trying to make the word life reflect the woman's life more so than
Yeah.
being pro-life. But we had to make that framing bigger than the logo, because if they just saw the logo by itself, someone could very easily think some percent of the time pro-life.
Right.
But by reframing it, by having larger messaging, but then we actually had to have larger messaging in the logo, which is not
Yeah.
always practical, and making it having to work really hard to try and reduce the number of people who would think, oh, that word life in the logo means pro-life. And so if we
Right.
didn't have the word life in their logo, we could have used that valuable time and that valuable space promoting services, promoting, a call to action or our care. But instead, we're having to spend, the very first moments trying to say, oh, we want to make sure we want to make sure you look at this in the
Let me
right
make this
angle.
clear.
Let's get the angle set. Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's what the word life does. It makes us we have to spend all of our initial moments on that. And those initial moments are so precious. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
having the word life not in it, oh, huge help. But
Yeah.
with it in it, it's not like someone's hopeless with it. they can still
Right.
work it, but you have to do more work. Like essentially, you're
Yeah.
just making it. You're making, we have to essentially climb those steps before we get to the, where we normally would just get to right away.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really an important point, though. Kind of what I was saying at the beginning. It doesn't doom you to have a name, but it definitely makes things a little bit harder and if a pregnancy center's, just starting out, absolutely avoid those names. I get
Yeah.
that it's harder to change a name, though. I do. I understand that, and I understand there's
Well,
roadblocks, and there's the
yeah.
community knows you as this. There's a lot of things that go along with that, and I get that. From the
Well,
standpoint of
yeah.
you want your donors to remember who you are,
Yeah, and speaking of the donors, so I'm a big fan of keeping the current, name that may or may not be that great for clients. I'm a big fan of keeping it for donors and then
Mhm.
adopting an additional name that's specifically
Okay, like
built
a
for
DBA.
clients.
Yeah.
Well, or having a second brand for
Right.
for client marketing and having it being different than the donor marketing brand. And while donors will be with someone for decades, a client hopefully will only be a client once. And yeah, we're not looking for repeat clients.
But we'll
Part
take
of
them.
our,
We'll take
but we
them.
will, but we will take them. But that's not the object. Yeah, hopefully, yeah,
Right.
it shows room
Absolutely.
for improvement at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah. No,
um,
that's true.
but yeah. So some of the names that I have found that have been really good, like, let me back up. So if someone came to you and said, "Hey, I thought of this name, Xerox. I think it's going to be great." Am I the only one that would think, "Oh, that's terrible. Like, how are you going to spell it? I mean, how are you going to say it in the radio? Like, no one's going to get it. That's a terrible name." And
Right.
same thing with
Yeah.
like Chevron. I don't know. Maybe that would have been okay, but there's so many brands that have like they're a made up word. Honestly, on day one, I probably would have been like, I think we got to try again. It's got too many syllables. It's got some weird letters. It's really weird to say. People are going to mispronounce it. But in reality, like Xerox and, it just comes like we all know what it is. Or
Right.
Kleenex. Kleenex is a weird word. I mean, it's got an X at the end and it starts off with a KL. I mean, it just doesn't come off as something I would have picked. But
Yeah. No, I
it
think in
worked really,
general,
really well.
yeah, in general, I feel like simple is better. I want people to be able to look at it and know
Yeah.
how to spell it. That's how I felt when I named my children too. I'm like, ooh, I want them to be able to look at it and know what it says, know how to pronounce
Yeah.
it. And
So,
there's a lot of big
yeah.
brands that don't follow that, and I think that, that's fine. But when we're talking about the kind of budgets that pregnancy centers have, usually that's
Yeah.
not going to be ideal,
Yeah. And
typically.
there's a lot of for the success stories with weird names, I'm sure we could find a lot of names that no one knows if we were to go
Right.
look. And some of my favorite pregnancy clinic names are very short. Like I really like Spero, Spero,
Hmm.
which is Latin for the word hope. It feels like spearmint gum to me for some reason, or like a bird sparrow, but it just comes off as just so pleasant and
Yeah.
inviting and organic. And I just love the way that feels. Um, Another one I really like is Eve, EVE, which is Latin for life. And then also like the sister word is Eva. There's a couple clinics that just recently came out with
Yeah.
Eve and Eva, and then Eva is just EVA, also means life, just a different spelling. And I think those are brilliant because they're so short and they're so
Mhm.
beautiful and they're easy to enjoy, not alone say and pronounce and spell, but
Yeah.
like I really like I just feel good when I think of those names. Like they just come off as so and I feel like they can work really well for medical. I feel like they
Mhm.
can work really well for memorability, for being memorable.
Right.
Um, yeah, and the shorter it is, the bigger you can make it when you need to, which is really handy
Yes.
for design.
Yes. When you're doing digital
Three
marketing,
characters is
in their
amazing. Yeah,
face.
EVE.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree.
Um, so tell me, what are some of your favorite names that you've come across?
So I think my all-time favorite name, and I I don't even know a ton about the center, but Stanton Medical Clinic. I love it. It sounds so professional. It
It
sounds like
does.
a medical clinic. I'm like, that's awesome. And it was after Elizabeth Cady Stanton. So I think it's fantastic. That's probably
That one
like,
sounds, yeah, it sounds like Stanford. It feels like it's,
right.
you
Like
said
it's
Stanton. It felt like, oh, I just stepped into a college class or a
right.
college level, like it's going to be professional. Like it sounds very professional.
Right. Yeah, I love that. So I think that's probably my favorite one.
Mm,
Um,
That's a
I
good,
I know there's a lot of centers with like options in the name, like options for women, options pregnancy center. I like those, but think I think they might the tide might be turning on those. I think that it's
okay.
a lot of people know what you mean now, if that
I think
makes
the
sense.
problem with the word options is that there are they have a low ceiling because there's so many clinics that have the word option in their name that if you wanted to, it's really hard to know which one someone's thinking about. Or it's sometimes if you know
Yeah.
about a few, it becomes really hard to think about one of them because there's like if you change one letter, we just got 10 more clinics. If you change one word, we just found 100 more clinics with that same name. There's just so many
Yeah.
clinics with a similar name. However, on the flip side, where that can work is if you're in a single county and there's no other clinic in that county with the name Options Care Center, Option Pregnancy Clinic, Option something, or Real Options even. If there's no one else in that space, then you're not competing for someone's mind space on for that name. But when you start look when I look at it at the national level, which most people don't, it makes me
Right.
very I there's hundreds of names with that word options in it or pregnancy care. Pregnancy is in like half of all the names, like probably half.
Mhm.
So many names. Um, yeah. One of the names I also like that recently came out of Austin, Texas, is Trotter House, and Trotter was named after a person as well. And that one is interesting because before they were Austin Pregnancy Clinic or Austin Pregnancy Center, and they
Yeah.
weren't allowed on campus because of they were just told they weren't allowed on campus. But after they changed their name, they were invited onto the college campus, and it was like a light switch kind of switch, night and day when it
Interesting.
came to that. So the name was huge when it comes to reaching, when it comes to reaching an invitation to the local college
Oh yeah.
campus. That and essentially taking out pregnancy center was the main switch for that name piece because Trotter House essentially just simply is sort of like Xerox. It didn't mean anything. It was completely unmarked by previous agendas or previous stories. It was a brand new name with a fresh beginning.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how quickly you become in your community's mind, exactly what you are. And if that starts out bad, it's really hard to change that. It's really hard
Yeah,
to go back and change that.
yeah, that's true. It's like three times harder to build trust than it is to get trust initially. And getting the trust initially
Yeah.
is much easier than it is to try and like turn something around. Yeah.
Yeah. But what you were talking about getting into the schools, I think that's a really important thing for centers to be thinking about is like making sure their name is neutral enough, sounding that they can get into secular events. That's another thing, religious sounding names. That's another of my pet peeves when it sounds like overly religious. You're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah. And my pet peeve, I guess, would be whenever there's like a hidden message in it that is that if it's Latin, I'm not opposed to Latin. I'm okay with Latin, but I'm opposed to like it being like, we have a picture of a baby, a pregnant mom in the logo, but you may not see it, but our donors will see it. And so, but I think the women that are, the young woman who is 17 or the young woman who is 21 is probably a little bit more savvy than our when it comes to picking up subtle imagery adjustments than our 60 plus donor audience. And so I
Right.
don't think that's a fair expectation to have is that,
Yeah.
we can have this like hidden message or Easter egg in the logo or messaging that sort of like says, but yes, we are pro-life.
Right.
I think we need to essentially have one brand that speaks directly to the abortion vulnerable women that says, we're here to care for you and help you with medical, at a medical professional level. And then after building trust and rapport, bring in Jesus, bring in the direction. But we have to have trust before we start leveraging direction. I mean, if you have no trust, you give someone direction, they're just not going to listen.
It doesn't even matter.
It doesn't even matter
what you just said.
Yeah. But if you trust somebody and they provide direction, then that's when you listen. Like that's what we all do. It's part of how trust is like a prerequisite before you give someone direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think my biggest pet peeve in pregnancy center naming and all of that is just like the overall thing that we have to do it, right? Because I feel like it would be so wonderful. I know I live in a fairy tale. If we just had one name, if we were just the same, I think that's one of the biggest advantages the pro-choice movement has is, yes, there are other abortion clinics, but come on, Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood's who everybody
I think
thinks
Planned
of.
Parenthood does like 40%, and the next player is like at, I want to say under 7, but I don't know the next.
Yeah.
It's a huge, obviously a huge drop, but yeah, they're practically doing half of all the abortions. It sounds like.
Yeah.
I think that one came from Jarrell with Heartbeat. I think that's where I pulled that number from, and
Yeah.
I probably broke the number. So
That's all right. It's a huge percentage. That's what we know.
Obviously we know it's a huge percentage, but sometimes we think it's probably like 90 or 80, and it's not quite there. It's more closer to like 50-ish or slightly below 50.
Right, but their
That's
brand
still
is on point because we think it's 90.
And the next person, the person after them is like minute. So there's not like a second player. It's more like all the players
Like
sort of fall into that.
segmented.
Yeah. Yeah, just a large number of players. One of the arguments that I've heard is that as a pregnancy clinic movement, we have 3,000 names or ish, 2,000 plus names. And so it's really hard to throw, for someone to target one of us because we have so many names. Like it's almost like we're ambiguous. But then again, also the flip side of that, or the negative of that, is that we're ambiguous and it's hard to think of us because I can think of some names, but when it comes to the ones that, crisis pregnancy clinic, the different names that start with CPC, the different names that use the word, care, options, pregnancy, women's. There's just so many. Like there are not just dozens. It's probably more like 50 plus, in all these different categories. But again, in the community, they can still be known in their community, but it's just when they want to branch out and go from being like a 4-location clinic to being the 5-state clinic, that's when they're going to start to hit these, our brand doesn't work so well scenarios. And they're going to be competing with people that have the same name, essentially. And that's sort of a hard place to be. But if you have a name that's like Obria, like that's a unique name. No one else has got. There's no Obrio. It's just Obria.
Yeah.
There's and so actually Obrio would be a fun masculine version, but they wouldn't do that. They have a beautiful marketing campaign, and so the Obria, they've got 26 locations, and they're trying to do that franchise model a little bit different than the average clinic, or very different.
Yes.
Going after Title 10 funding and having insurance involved, but Abria doing like that style. There's like birthright out of Canada, which is obviously like an ancient name when it came to the word birth in the name, and it sounds like not just it's like birthright. It's like very pro-life, very prenatal sounding. Like I don't know, can't really get much more prenatal birth sounding. But that one's got like 200 locations through their franchise membership model or something. It's huge.
They do, but it's, from what I understand, it's decreasing. So it's not increasing. It's the fact that they have been around so long.
They've been around for a long time, and people are, they're looking for, then they're experiencing the pain of an older name that doesn't relate to people today. And however, it's
So
great for the audience of life-minded women. Just the abortion-minded game chatted with a name that has a marketing put-off built into it.
I'm sorry, you kind of cut out there for a second. What were you saying?
Oh, sorry. Oh, I was just saying that birthright, it works well for women who are life-minded, but when it comes to women who are abortion-minded, it falls short of helping that group because they're more likely to try again on Google if they find a birthright,
Right.
I think. Because the name has a natural put off saying we're prenatal, and if someone's shopping to not be pregnant, they're not gonna go into a place that sounds prenatal.
Right. So I think the major question that centers have to ask themselves is like, do we want to be a resource center and help women, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah.
Or do we want to reach abortion-minded women? And those are two very different campaigns, you know? And so birthrights, they do good work. I'm not saying they don't, but they're not reaching the abortion-minded really. I mean, unless it's happenstance. They're not marketing to the abortion-minded so
So
much.
yeah,
I
I do
came from
think
a
they reach a
birthright,
percent. I
so
think they might. So, oh, you came from one. So my impression is that they do get abortion-minded women. I just feel like they are getting a lot less than what they would get if they had a
yes.
name that didn't have the built-in
Yeah,
put-offs.
yeah. It's not like they don't get any, but they're not marketing to them. That's not like
Yes.
they're not doing a good job marketing to them, which is why a lot of birthrights have become something else. Whenever I worked for a birthright, actually, it was, I'm trying to think. When I started, it was like 2013,
Okay.
I think 2012. And so not that long ago. And they had the cutout of the bee was like a phone, like
Yes. Oh, yes.
like
The
a
old phone with the
old
cord.
school. Yeah, and I was like,
Yeah. One of the
guys,
wired cords.
we have,
Yeah.
and they have changed that. They've updated that, I will say. But it's just
I
it's
wrote some
hasn't
emails to
kept up
Birthright back around
the times as far as
2012.
marketing goes.
Yeah, I wrote some emails to them about, how that phone is like, people aren't gonna know what that is.
I
You
know,
know?
I know.
But yeah, yeah. Hmm, that's interesting. But yeah, so what was your role at the Birthright when you worked there? Were you working on their marketing or were you working as a clinic director?
No, so yeah, I started as a program director and
Okay.
then I was the executive director for a while. So it was a pretty small clinic, and honestly, the name was hurting it. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
they have since closed. It just wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't really easy to reach people with that name, to reach and we did a ton of helping the community and helping underprivileged moms and giving out diapers and things like that, which is great. Again, I don't have any problem with that. I'm not trying to say it's less than,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah.
if that's your goal, that's wonderful. But if your goal is to reach abortion minded women, you have to rethink your marketing.
Yeah. I think some people find themselves working within that birthright kind of name structure, and they
Hmm.
have a desire to reach the abortion-minded women, but then what's sort of holding them from making that change is that they would have to like disconnect from their umbrella group and who is providing like this backstory and we've
Yeah,
have all this good history and we don't want to dishonor all that experience, and so it creates like this, it creates a little bit of a hard place to be when it comes to wanting to reach the abortion minded better, but yet also wanting to honor our roots.
yeah,
And I feel like a lot of clinics who have less known names are in that same exact boat when it comes to
mhm,
having a name that's been around for 30 years. And here we are, we find ourselves in this position today where it's not working well for the abortion minded, it's working brilliantly for donors, and we don't want to dishonor all of the work and the team who has been putting in decades of volunteer prayer. But and so
right,
I guess what I would say is sometimes just simply speaking, um, making yourself vulnerable by sharing the truth of what's going on is probably the best way to try and just like figure it out. Or if you reach out to someone who is gifted in marketing and ask them for insight and to simply
Right.
lay it out in a helpful way. Our goal is not to step on people's toes, but sometimes we sort of need to share things in a way that says we really want to honor what you did, but at the same time, we also want to be positioned to be relevant for the next 20 plus years. And
Right.
so,
Absolutely.
and logos and brands are like the long game. Having a good brand that's today will be an impact on the work being done in 20 years. It's just or it could be a positive impact, a negative impact, but it will continue to impact because it's like the cornerstone piece that connects all these other elements and services that are provided. And so one of my favorite stories when thinking about brands and telling this to clients and clinics and working with people is I tried to find the whole like a similar story in the secular world when it comes to like we have one part of us is serving the life-minded. One part of us is serving the abortion-minded client, and then we also have donors who are opposed to abortion. So we are on the spectrum of life, meaning like pro-life or pro-abortion. We have people on different parts of that timeline, and so when looking for like an example of this in like somewhere outside of the pro-life world to try and get insight on what someone else did, I came across Quaker Oats. So out of curiosity, I'm not sure if I ever shared this with you before, but do you happen to know who owns Quaker Oats? Maybe. So Quaker Oats is owned by PepsiCo. And so Pepsi owns Quaker Oats. But the reason why you don't know that is because they never market them together because it doesn't make sense to have Pepsi,
Right.
which is delicious and sugary and bad for you, but yet still delicious. And then Quaker Oats, if it doesn't have the sugar in it, it's actually heart healthy. Like that's a genuine statement. And so at least I think it is. But on the spectrum of health, we have one that's healthy, one that's not healthy, but they're both great in some
Yeah.
ways. And so what I find interesting, and then Pepsi also owns Taco Bell. They own Lay's potato chips. They own Gatorade.
See, and I
And
knew all that.
yeah, because those are
Because it's
all inside the
all
Taco
under the
Bell.
same.
Like they have the Dorito flavored, taco, and they have the different Mountain Dew flavors, and that's because they're all under the same ownership.
Mhm.
Um, but Quaker Oats is never in Taco Bell because it's obviously a different genre. I feel
Right.
like they have like an unhealthy vehicle going one direction, and they have a different healthy vehicle servicing a different population of people on a different part of town, going a different direction. And what I have learned from that is that I think it's okay for pricing clinics to consider the idea of having the multi-brand or, more multi-brand strategy, meaning more than one brand, and having
Mhm.
one brand for life-minded work and one brand for abortion-minded friendly work. It's not that those clients are it's not that they are pro-abortion. It's more like they're okay using it based on their scenario and what they've been told
Right.
and what they think that they can do based on the fact that it feel like they have no option more so than they have options. And but anyways, all that to say is having more than one brand is something that other companies do. They have a brand per audience, and they sometimes have multiple brands based on the different things they do. Um, but yeah, changing brands is such a big undertaking. I think it's really good to plant seeds and then let them, it might take 5 years before that new brand's ready, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's good. If it takes 2 years, 5 years, maybe even 6 or 7, but the idea is that prison clinics are so needed even in 40 plus years.
Yeah.
Even with Roe versus Wade being overturned, obviously the need to help women in unplanned pregnancies is not going away. It's just changing. It's just
Yeah.
changing based on which
Absolutely.
state you're in. And so there's
Absolutely.
there's no end based on Roe versus Wade being overturned. It's more of we have to adjust our strategy to reach women based on how they're looking and where they are. But I don't think unplanned pregnancies are ever, I don't think I think they
They're
will
not
always
going anywhere.
exist. Exactly. They will always exist as long as we have humans. We will have unplanned pregnancies
Yeah.
that need help and
So
care.
I live in Missouri, so a lot of people think there's no abortions happening in Missouri. That's not quite accurate, but
Yeah.
there
it's
are
like
a
the
lot of
St. Louis border.
restrictions.
It's all you're like, yeah, there's states all around you with abortion clinics even just
Right.
across the state lines.
Well, there's ones in Missouri as well. I mean, a lot of
Oh,
hospitals.
isn't it just
There's
one?
not
Oh,
freestanding ones, but a lot of hospitals perform abortions. Most people don't even realize that. So there's abortions happening in Missouri, but it's probably the best example still of, what it could look like after if Roe versus Wade gets overturned. If it does go to state rights, probably Missouri will become an abortion-free state. Does that mean that they're going to stop? Absolutely not. The clinic right across the river from St. Louis, that is in Illinois, is huge, and it's
yeah.
so many Missouri women are going there now. And so I think that's one of the things that, we need to be thinking about, and actually a pet peeve of mine, because a lot of people say, like, Missouri doesn't have abortions anymore. I'm like, well, Missouri women are still getting abortions. There's still a fight to fight.
Yeah, I
And I
was at
think a lot of
the Alliance for Life in Missouri, and one of the gentlemen was one of the speakers was talking about how they've been measuring the numbers of abortions happening, and really they've seen a shift. So like the number of abortions across the state line has gone up, while the number of abortions maybe reported in Missouri has gone down. But the total number of abortions almost it seems like it just matches the trend line more so than it being
yeah,
a drastic shift.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. And if Roe versus Wade gets overturned, Illinois is not going to stop having abortions. They're not. So I think we kind of live here in this world that's almost the same as it will be if that happens, where people are just going right over the state lines. And they also make it really, really easy for them. So if you go to the Planned Parenthood in St. Louis, they make it really easy. And if needed, they will provide transportation over to the one across the
yeah,
river.
I've been seeing that
So,
that messaging showing up. Transportation. So like if someone needs a flight or a carpool, yeah, that's essentially sort of trying to including that in part of their service of reaching their audience. And essentially they're so it sounds like the Illinois group has expanded their reach when it comes to marketing in order to include Missouri because now they're showing that as a need probably on their side. But
yeah,
quote they're servicing that area as like their scope of
right,
area.
right. It's an
Yeah, that's
interesting
interesting.
dynamic.
Yeah. So going back to the idea of what if we all had the same name? I wonder on one side, people would know our name. On the other side, Planned Parenthood might shift their mud throwing from crisis pregnancy clinics or whatever they happen to be calling us now, probably still that, to maybe that new, unified name. So we would become more of like a unified target, but yet we'd also have more of like, would be more of like a household, like you could get help at that name. And so that would become more of like we would have more awareness amongst the nation if we had a unified name. And it would come with a
Yeah.
tax, but it would have also greater awareness. And awareness has been like our Achilles heel in some
It's a
way. Like that's
struggle. It is. It's definitely a struggle.
awareness is that's the part we always seem to fall short, like
Yeah.
across the nation.
Yeah.
I don't think I can't think,
Absolutely.
everyone's got an awareness issue.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think the main thing there's definitely positive and negative to it. I understand, like, in some ways we don't necessarily want everybody to know exactly who we are and what we do, right? In the sense that we want to reach a woman who may not come there if they know it's a pregnant or a pro-life center. We want to be able to reach those women. So having one name definitely can make you become, okay, that's the pro-life place. I get that. However, if you think of the marketing dollars that are being wasted, that if everybody was under a unified name, unified branding, we would have so much more funding to put into um, things. And one of those things to me is having really good medical models. So I think if you have a really good medical model, it's a little harder for, Planned Parenthood or NARAL or whoever else to sling mud. If we are providing the medical services And a lot of centers are, and a lot that aren't are moving towards that. But if we can provide really good medical centers where they can't say fake clinic, then I think we
It
can
seems like they say
combat a
that.
lot of that.
Yeah, they seem to say it regardless of what's going on in a clinic, though. Like I feel like they just throw it as like their default statement, regardless
Right.
of the medical services being provided. I mean, regardless of the fact that if an organization's under the supervision and direction of a medical director and who's licensed, spent a lot of time in school, has all the credentials, but yet they
Mhm.
still throw that. Like they don't, I don't see them holding back at certain clinics. They seem to just throw it on anyone who will be promoting life as the best option.
Right. No, and I know what you're saying, especially from the standpoint of places that have a medical director and maybe have an ultrasound. But I'm talking about like full
Oh,
medical services, and there comes a point where
oh, hmm.
what they're saying, people are like, that doesn't make any sense because you have full medical services. I'm talking about places like pro women's health centers. Are you
Oh,
familiar with
okay. So
those?
no. So tell
Oh,
me more about that. So is that a pro-life or is that a neutral group or
so
pro-choice group?
they are pro-life. The pro women's health centers is it's basically a certification. I don't know exactly the word they would use, but basically there isn't a center called Pro Women's Health Center, right? There's different centers that meet these
Oh,
standards
okay.
that become a Pro Women's Health Center, but they have a different name. It's it's you are considered a Pro Women's Health Center because you meet these standards and because you have these services.
Okay.
And so, and I think it's one thing that they really did probably to get around the fact that um, we are operating under different names, but to still be able to say, like, we want to partner together and basically hold each other to a higher standard. And there's not a ton of them. I think there's like 8 or 9. I could be wrong. There's not a ton of them throughout the states, but these places have prenatal care. I mean, these places have full medical centers, not just ultrasound or just STI testing, which most centers, if they have medical, it's ultrasound, maybe STI testing. But these centers are doing, like I said, prenatal care and everything. And so if we have those kind of services and we become places that you can accept insurance and things like that, then it's a little harder to sling mud. But that means you have to have lots of pro-life OBGYNs and you have to have lots of funding. And it's one of the places that I see, if we could cut down that marketing budget because we don't have to market 50,000 names, maybe we could put it toward more services. I think most centers want that. The centers that I talk to, they're not stagnant. They're not wanting to stay stagnant. They might be somewhat stagnant because of funding. But nobody's like, oh yeah, we're totally satisfied with exactly the services we do. Even the ones that do a ton, they're like, we want to do more and we're excited about this. I mean, the
Yeah.
pregnancy center directors I know they want to help people. They want to be there. And funding is a challenge. It is.
Yeah, and providing greater services gives us the ability to build more rapport, trust along
Right.
someone's life journey. I was talking with a clinic who essentially was working, a couple of clinics who were working on this new idea of providing rape kits for helping women who have gone through a rape scenario, providing them medical services after that experience. And what that resulted in was the police department sending referrals for women to get care at that pregnancy clinic instead of sending them to the ER because the pregnancy clinic was built to give more compassionate care, whereas the ER may have been more sterile or may have been lacking in the compassionate side of things.
Right.
And then another thing those same clinics were doing was going through a certification process to understand how to identify if someone's being sex trafficked in order to then send referrals to the police when they see a sex trafficking scenario taking place, where the women showing up in that kind of scenario. But yeah, so certain services have direct impact on how to reach our current primary audience. And there's a lot of services that we could do. I mean, the rape kit and the identifying sex trafficking are just two examples of like like they're completely in line with serving our audience and helping them have healthier, better lives, and helping reach women in these hard scenarios with our current, heart.
And it's such a great step in the right direction, for centers who would love to become full medical, but don't have $1 million to throw around, because it's very expensive to provide prenatal care. That's
Yeah.
extremely expensive. But if you can provide some real services, real medical services, other than just ultrasound, and I'm not discounting ultrasound, I love ultrasound. It's
Oh, yeah.
extremely important. But when we focus on just that, we're missing a lot,
Yeah, it's an important part, but there's other parts that are complementary,
Right.
and building up building up that trust essentially means building up relationships with clients in a way that we can, well, hopefully be known when they need to think of somebody, or when they need to refer somebody, they'll think of us, and we're sort of breaking that awareness barrier.
Yeah.
So Allison, when you think, if you imagine a clinic director and her board, maybe her and her husband brainstorming, and maybe people at her church brainstorming on a name, what would that look like for you? How would you start your brainstorming session? I'm trying to think of a name for a new clinic.
I think I would start with building the parameters of what we don't want. You know, okay, everybody's in the room. Okay, hey, we need to talk about, we're going to all throw out ideas, but we want to make sure they don't sound religious. We want to make sure that life's not in the name. We want to make sure that it's not hard to pronounce, those kind of things. And just starting with those parameters, and just being in that mindset, I think people are creative. People can come up with lots of amazing things. I'm so impressed all the time whenever I see what these centers are doing. But if you don't have those parameters in mind to begin with, you're going to come up with things that really appeal to donors.
Yeah, and I would say, I think that sounds really good. I would agree with that. And then I would say making a long list of
Mhm.
ideas, and then start crossing off. Oh, that one actually does sound religious, or that one, oh, that sounds like it could be more pro-life than the others.
Mhm.
That doesn't meet our objective. And then this one, oh, it's hard. It's a little bit too hard to spell. This one's too long, too many characters. But if you come up with a list of, like, if you work on making a long list, you do need to remove all but one. And so it's okay
Right.
to start taking them out one at a time. Like, oh, someone else already has that name, or, that one sounds really similar to this group's name. And so
Yeah.
it's good to start taking those out, and just thinking, someone's going to answer the phone, that name, thank you for calling da 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 name. And so it's good to think about how that's going to sound, because someone's going to be saying it so many times. It'd be nice to honor that volunteer and staff by giving them a name that sounds enjoyable.
Yes. And simple, not overly complicated.
Spero, Eve, Eva. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a group called Collage Center, and I think that's a brilliant name. Thrive, I think that name is
I
so
love
full of
Thrive.
energy. I love it. Yeah.
Simple, one
Oh,
word.
Obria. I think it sounds like OB doctor, and then it's got that Hispanic
Yeah.
feminine Ria to it. That's nice. Obria. Um, Trotter House. I love, someone's last name. That was the
Yeah.
Canton, right? Yeah. That's it.
Stanton. Yeah.
Oh,
I love
Stanton.
that one.
Yeah. Because there's only one Stanton. I don't, there's,
Yeah.
and there's only one Trotter House. Like, because if you pick someone's name, you're essentially creating something that's, you're really unique.
As long as
Um,
their name's not Jones, right?
exactly. Yeah. Make sure. Yeah. But it's also a way to honor one of the founders, or one of
Right.
the inspirational people who may or may not still be with us. But honoring that person with using their name is a really good idea. One of the clinics in Los Angeles, Orange County, Life Centers of Orange County, their donor facing name is Meki Team, and Meki is the name of the person who started the clinic. That's her first name. So Meki Team is like their donor facing name, and that one came off really well.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and
Yeah,
what actually one of the one of the very first clinics ever opened was Pearson Place in Hawaii, and that one's based on the name Pearson. And that one still actually sounds really good for being one of the first names. It's got some good longevity. They got lucky or fortunate, or they were blessed to have such a good name for, because
Yeah.
most names don't last 40 years. They don't come off as sounding good still in 40 years as they did on day one. But Pearson Place sounds really good. I think that one's a solid name. But yeah. So what were we gonna say?
Sorry, I was looking at the Pro Women's Health Centers. It looks like there's like
Oh,
12 of them now. That's good.
okay. Oh,
They're
good.
they're growing. But one of them that I really like the name of is Tepeyac. So they're
Tepeyac. Oh,
in
we
DC
worked with
area.
Tepeyac. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic name. And I know I said simple. I guess it's not simple, but it's not hard. It's not super
Well,
hard. No.
it's
And it's
easier than
unique,
Xerox. It's easier than
right?
Kleenex.
And it's unique, When
Yeah,
you
there's a
think
lot
of
of names
that,
that are
you
that
only think of
simple.
one
Yeah,
thing.
Tepeyac. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's good.
Yeah. I also think, when centers have two different names, I personally like that when they have a donor facing name and they have a client facing name. But I understand that not everybody wants to do that. So, one of the things that I love is whenever people just play off of a different language, just I think you were talking about Eve and Eva and all of those that you can play off of another language and still kind of pull in that life affirming name
Yeah.
without
To
being
be, yeah,
super
but someone that hears the name Eve, they might think of the Disney character, or they might think of Eve from the Bible,
right.
which is a woman. They might think of a woman. And
Right, exactly.
yeah. Actually, I think did I get that wrong? I wonder if Eve actually means woman and not life. Because vitae is life in Latin.
Yeah.
I wonder if I made a mistake there. Let's see. What's Eve Latin to English? Let me go look that up. Eve. Oh yeah, it is life. Okay, it's life, but it very easily could be woman because of Eve and
Right.
Genesis. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if people translated it as woman as well. That would be very reasonable.
Right. Absolutely.
And actually, that sort of makes that name even more brilliant. That it could be life or woman or
Yeah.
a really fun Disney character.
Exactly.
Yeah,
No, I think
actually, speaking of that, if you think about Planned Parenthood and their name for their app, which is Roo, the cute kangaroo from Winnie the Pooh, and they named it Roo. It just makes like that was a good name, and it makes me sad that they had such a good name for their app. Yeah,
they have some brilliant marketing.
they do. They
That's
have some brilliant marketing people working really hard. Yeah,
I mean they have
but
to.
they do. They have to work hard. They're spending all that money they're making working on things to make more.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's pretty wild, but I think the biggest thing is pregnancy centers need to know that they have to be thinking about these things. That it's not just what sounds good to you, because you, as the director, as a board member, you're the donor audience.
yes,
If it sounds good to you, it might not be it might not be that good. And
yeah,
asking neutral parties, I think that's another thing, just like informal surveys, super helpful. I'm not saying survey your donor base and ask them what name you should get. Don't do that. But just informal surveys, especially, if you have a teenage daughter, and ask her friends, things like that. Ask some young people and just get lots of ideas. And I like your idea of just making a huge exhausted list and then just mark off what's not going to work.
yeah. And I think I like your idea of like, if you go to a college campus and you don't mark yourself as like, you go there with a generic survey in order to ask, they have no option but to give you good feedback because they're not trying
Mhm.
to tell you what you want to hear. They're essentially, if you set yourself up to get neutral, unbiased feedback from the audience you're trying to serve,
Right.
that's a really, that's smart. Yeah.
I think a mistake a lot of centers do whenever they're rebranding is they go right to their donors and they're like, oh, they're a big donor, so maybe they'll have input. And that's great and all, but our donors don't know our business for the most part. They know the goal, they know the mission, but they don't understand the day to day a lot of times.
Yeah.
And not all of them. Certainly, there's some that are
Well,
more aware than others. But
and we can always share that day to day with them, but it takes time to,
it
because
does exactly.
this is not general, this is not, we're marketing we're in a battlefield, and we're trying to get help from one group, and we're trying to help this other group who is, almost like as if they're in a burning building, and we're trying to send in the troops, the firefighters, to try and help pull them out of this terrible experience, and with all these negative Planned Parenthood marketing messages, trying to set them up for destruction, essentially, trying to
Yeah.
help rescue them from this.
You
And
saying that just made me. I just want to write a book called "Marketing in a Battlefield." You want to write it with me, Jacob?
I would say yes, but I'm already like 3 times overbooked.
Yeah, me too.
I'm in the middle of another book project called Content Marketing, and we're halfway through it. And so I probably need to honor my current writing friend before I start a new
Yeah.
one. So my colleague,
Fair.
my friend Bill and I are working on that one, and it's been about 10 months before I've written anything, and I need to it's on my to-do list.
It's fun. I hear you.
Um,
I understand that.
so one more thing, just to try and bring this back to like how to do it. I think besides making that long list, besides getting feedback from the community, another element that I think, should probably be at the very beginning and then in the middle and the end would be prayer. Going to God, asking for inspiration, asking God for direction, and then trying to listen for his voice. And then listening for, looking for opportunities for him to speak through the Bible, through prayer life. And then when you get down to those final four names, just praying over them and asking God, which of these names is the name you want us to use, or please tell us the name you want us to use, and then being patient and keep praying and waiting, because
Yeah.
it's at my church on Sunday, we were going over Philippians 4:4-7. It talks about having joy, being gentle, giving all of our requests to God, and then it talks about finding the peace of God so that you can avoid problems. And it sort of sounded like to me like having the peace of God means you sort of know where God wants you to go after you've prayed, so that you have confidence in where to go, and you can
Yeah.
relax and have peace and drop off all, let the anxiety just fall off. And so I would say, if you pray about a name and you feel like God said that's the one, you don't have to keep looking. You can now have confidence and go with that name and hold on to it. And if by chance you have uncertainty, you should probably ask your team members to pray about it too, because
Yeah.
God's going to say that, God's consistent. And if you end up hearing something different, you probably need to ask that voice. Was Jesus God? Did Jesus come in the flesh? Did Jesus die on the cross? And if that voice says, essentially that's the way of trying to test the spirit. But another way of testing the spirit is also to make sure that you have, everyone on your team is praying and trying to
Right.
test the spirit. But anyways, all that to say is, I think prayer is a way to find that confidence in, like, this is the name that we're going to use for a season, for 10 years, for some period of time. But then again, that name might change, and prayer life needs to be part of that journey, because
Yeah.
if we're trying to reach a group that's changing, a group that didn't use Twitter 10 years ago, or, didn't use Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat
TikTok,
and
Snapchat.
TikTok and Tinder and all of these dating apps and social media, and, and essentially living online. And this wasn't even a thing 30 years ago when all these clinics started, 28, 35 years ago when clinics started. People were different. People's reaction to ideas was different. And
Right.
so having a good prayer life means you can, hear God's direction on where you need to go to reach the people we're trying to serve.
Absolutely.
So yeah, prayer. Lots of prayer from the whole team. But yeah, I think blessed, asking for God's blessing and prayer of our name, would be really, yeah, the beginning, middle, and end kind of steps, while doing all the work in between.
Yeah, exactly. You still got to do the work.
Yeah. Well, so I've really enjoyed this podcast. Would you mind wrapping us up in prayer and sort of praying for those clinics who might have one of those names that might need to be redone or
Yeah,
rebranded or refreshed, and just sort of helping encourage them to seek God's voice on it, perhaps?
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Oh, dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you bless us in this movement. I pray that you bless the pro-life movement as a whole, and especially these clinic directors and volunteers and everybody who's just on the front lines in the day-to-day helping women and trying to reach women. I just pray for your direction in everything that we do. I pray that you will just break in where it's needed and stir hearts where it's needed. Um, and I know there's so many challenges when different people have different opinions and all of that, but we also know that you are God and you are mightier than that. So I pray that it doesn't become an issue of strife between people when people have different opinions on what should be done, and instead they can come together and bring you into it and find good solutions. And I pray for, again, all of the center directors. Just bless them and all of the women that we're reaching. Amen.
Amen. All right. Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm going to work on putting this together probably tonight, and I'll send you a link, and
Awesome. Yeah.
hopefully there's a lot of clinics that need to hear this. So I think this is going to be really helpful to them
Yeah.
because they need to be encouraged that it's okay. They're in like, they're all in the same, a lot of them in the same boat. They
Mhm.
think they don't know they're in the same boat, but sometimes, they don't realize that everyone else has also got a bad name.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is like I want people to realize we're not insulting you, you
No,
know.
no. If I was in that room 34 years ago, I would have made the same decision they did. I would have been
Yeah.
like, let's do
Yeah.
Crisis Praise Clinic. That's the name to go with.
Well, and so many of them were brilliant for the time,
Yes.
for that
Yes.
time, but times change. It's not that it was
Exactly.
always a bad name, it's just things change. So,
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, when my first website that I ever built for the Crisis Pregnancy Clinics of Tucson, I made all the mistakes you could possibly ever make as a brand new person on the learning curve. Like,
mhm.
it was, I've got no judgment. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know exactly how people make bad mistakes and bad decisions when they're starting off at ground zero. Like, I just feel blessed that we got so many experts in the field now that can help
right,
people fast track their, skipping all the bad decisions and bad choices. And so we're in a different space. We have mature team members in the pro-life world who you can leverage their expertise and
right.
creativity. And as a group, we are so much better. And we're helping each other along that journey. It's been good.
Yeah, and so I don't know if you can if you can clip this in, but
Oh,
another
sure.
thing.
Yeah, I can clip it in. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so another thing that I want to mention is we do have lots of experts. We do have lots of resources to reach out to. So you're not on your own. And I work for Vitae Foundation. They are a free resource to pregnancy centers. We don't charge
Yes.
anything. We want to help you. And so if you have questions about your name or your branding or how to market, like that's literally what we're here for. We're here to help in that regard. And one of the ways we're going to help with that is introducing the Vitae Vault. So that has lots of free content on different best practices, what our research has shown, trainings, even some like social media graphics that you can literally just like pull over, copy paste. If you have someone who is new to social media, or they're not sure what needs to be on your page, we're going to have some stuff available. So all of that is just to help. So no cost to anyone.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Yeah, Vita, you guys are a unique group. You're fundraising so that you can provide free services to clinic and help them with their marketing. And that's just such a it feels like a picture of Jesus, where you're essentially doing the work, you're going the extra mile by fundraising and then doing the mile of helping the clinic with their marketing. Like that's a sweet thing.
Yeah, it's pretty wonderful. I have to say I feel really, really blessed to be where I'm at. I was 11 years old the first time I got introduced to Vitae, and it was at a fundraising event. I think my babysitter canceled or something. I don't know, but for some reason my mom brought me along to this event, and that was like my first introduction into the pro-life movement, which I don't think I would be here if it weren't for that.
Aw. So, well, yeah, God's got fingerprints on how you probably can explore how his fingerprints run, how you were there that night then.
I know, it's so amazing.
Awesome. All right, Allison. Well, I think I'll include this last bit, and then yeah, I might just put it after the end music piece. It sort of flows in naturally.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it'll be good. Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, hey, have a
Thank
great
you.
day. I will look forward to seeing you at some future conference, I'm sure. Or I look forward to talking to you.
Will you be at Heartbeat?
Yes. Yeah, end of March.
Okay.
I'll be there.
I
Are you
will
gonna be there
not,
as well?
but
Oh, okay.
no.
I'll probably see your colleagues then.
We have 4 people going. I won't be there, but we do have people going. So
And you're out of Missouri, is that right?
yeah.
I'll probably see you at the Alliance for Life Missouri then, I would expect. Or maybe do you ever go to that one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I'll see you. It's in October-ish, right? So
Yeah.
anyways.
I was gonna say that's a little ways away.
See you in October.
We'll see you.
All right. Okay, have a great day. Nice talking to you.
Thank you so much.
All
Bye.
right. Bye-bye.
Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green. He leads me by quiet blue. Yeah, though I walk through darkest valleys, you are near me. Your protection and guidance are comforting me everywhere that I go. Spread a feast before me in the presence of my enemies, in front of my accusers, you're enjoying me. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup is overflowing. Mercy, beauty, and your love are chasing after me everywhere that I go, every day of my life, everywhere I go, every day of my life. You refresh and restore my soul. You lead me in righteous pathways for your name's sake alone. You've invited me to make your house my home. I will be no